My wife Amber had orchestrated her departure for a wealthier suitor, a scheme I unearthed, revealing a truth that shattered her world overnight. At 35, I, a former private military contractor, encountered Amber, 33, as I transitioned back to civilian life, seeking roles in corporate security management. She, a paralegal at a prestigious downtown law firm, exuded an aura of polished competence. She seemed to have her life meticulously arranged. We dated for 2 years, married, and settled into a modest suburban three-bedroom, the quintessential American dream. I eventually secured a position as security director for a luxury hotel chain, earning approximately $110,000 annually. While not a fortune, it was substantial enough that I never anticipated financial discord in our marriage. Amber continued her work at the law firm, though she reduced her hours to part-time after a few years, citing overwhelming stress. I supported her decision, believing in our partnership. 3 months ago, while searching for tax documents in Amber's desk, we'd been married a decade, by the way, I stumbled upon a typed letter. Its title, 15 Reasons Why Our 10-Year Marriage Should End. A bulleted indictment detailing why I was no longer deemed worthy. My initial reaction was a visceral blow to the gut, a momentary inability to breathe. Yet, an unsettling calm soon enveloped me. I'm typically prone to emotional responses, but military training has honed my control. Something inside me, however, irrevocably shifted. I meticulously read each point. Among them, insufficient income for desired lifestyle. Despite our comfortable living, it apparently lacked Instagram-worthiness. Embarrassing job protecting people was, inexplicably, a source of shame. Doesn't understand my needs for luxury. A $3,000 Gucci bag gifted last Christmas had seen 2 outings. Refusing to consider moving to a more affluent neighborhood. Too frugal with money, I called it responsible. Won't let me quit my job to pursue my passion project, her perpetually unprofitable online boutique. The most audacious, not ambitious enough to reach our potential, as if my sole purpose was to be her personal ATM. Other points touched on emotional availability, but the underlying motives were starkly clear: money and status. I was now too ordinary for her. I meticulously replaced the letter. No confrontation, no tears, no pleas. That's what she'd expect. That's what the old Jake would have done. But this was no time for sentiment or desperate begging. This demanded strategy. It was evident this had been festering for months, and I, preoccupied with providing a comfortable life, had been oblivious to our crumbling foundation. That night sleep eluded me. I lay beside her, consumed by the thought, who the hell is this gold-digging stranger beside me? The following week was a revelation. I began observing details I'd previously overlooked. Her phone was a constant companion, often accompanied by a subtle smile. She'd meticulously prepare for mere errands: full makeup, styled hair, designer outfits I'd funded. A nervous energy would ripple through her when calls came in, particularly from her new circle of friends from Pilates, affluent trophy wives married to men in finance and real estate. The warning signs were everywhere. She'd frequently mention her coworker Stacy's husband, recently made partner, now affording a vacation home, or her college friend Jessica, who married up and never worried about money. It felt like living with someone constantly benchmarking our lives against a reality show. That Friday at dinner, she brought up her friend Megan's recent divorce. She got the house in Westlake, half his retirement, and $9,000 a month in alimony, my wife remarked, her gaze fixed on me over her wine glass. She's dating a hedge fund manager now. Sometimes I wonder what that kind of freedom feels like. I simply nodded and offered more wine. The confusion on her face was immensely gratifying. She was baiting me, seeking a reaction, drama, anything to justify her impending actions. I offered nothing. Later that night, as she slept, I scrutinized our joint accounts. For 3 months, she'd been transferring funds to a separate account, $500 here, $700 there. Amounts too small to trigger immediate alarms, but now glaringly obvious. She was building an escape fund, a classic maneuver. I made a decision then and there. I wouldn't fight to keep her. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't resort to emotional manipulation. That was weakness. Instead, I would demonstrate precisely what losing me entailed, not through words but through decisive action. If she desired war, I would deliver it. The next morning, I rose early, pushed myself harder at the gym, and began making calls. First, to Steve, my army buddy, now a divorce attorney. Then to Mike, my old platoon sergeant, a financial advisor. I needed to safeguard myself while orchestrating the perfect scenario for her true intentions to surface. I'd always maintained a decent physique from my military days, but I'd grown complacent. Time to return to fighting trim. I started hitting the gym at 5:00 a.m. daily before work, adopted a strict meal plan, and eliminated all junk food. During this period, I began noticing subtle behaviors in Amber I'd inexplicably missed. The way she'd roll her eyes when I discussed saving for our future. How she'd forget to mention credit card charges until the bill arrived. Her constant need to upgrade something: the house, the car, her wardrobe. She immediately registered the shift in my demeanor. The emotional distance I maintained, my unilateral decisions, the cessation of my usual daily check-in texts. When she inquired if something was amiss, I simply smiled and said, just focusing on some personal goals. Her annoyance at my lack of detail was palpable. Are you going to tell me what these personal goals are? She asked, her voice tinged with the entitlement she'd cultivated. When they're achieved, I responded, walking away. The bewilderment on her face was priceless. By Monday, I had secured copies of all our crucial documents. By Wednesday, I possessed a clear financial overview and a precise understanding of what a separation would mean for both of us. Knowledge is power, and I was arming myself while she believed I was oblivious. I also took a step I'd deferred for years. I reconnected with an old commander who had been trying to recruit me for an elite private security firm, one that protected high-net-worth individuals and corporate executives. The salary was nearly triple my current earnings, but I'd always declined due to the increased travel, prioritizing being home with Amber. What a cruel joke that seemed now. The question was no longer if our marriage would survive. It was whether she deserved the chance to remain after creating that list. The ball was in my court, and I was about to demonstrate that discarding me would be her gravest error. Not by pleading, but by transforming into the man she couldn't afford to lose, a man with options, boundaries, and self-respect. I completely overhauled our routine. I started waking earlier, often leaving before she even stirred. My schedule became unpredictable. Some nights I'd be home for dinner, others a simple working late text devoid of explanation. Her confusion deepened daily. "You're never around anymore," she complained one evening. "I'm starting to feel like a single woman." "How interesting," I replied. "Is that what you want?" She immediately backpedaled. "That's not what I meant, I just miss you." Was all I said before returning to my book. I could feel her scrutinizing me, attempting to decipher the change. 2 weeks after discovering her list, I joined a high-end downtown gym and hired a personal trainer. I invested in new clothes that fit impeccably, nothing ostentatious, just an upgrade from department store to higher quality. I got a haircut at a sophisticated barber shop. These weren't drastic alterations, but significant enough to be noticed. When she commented on my appearance at dinner, I merely shrugged and said, "Just needed some changes." The way she studied me afterward spoke volumes. She was reevaluating my worth, seeing me with fresh eyes, and clearly displeased that other women might perceive the same. I created distance in other ways too. Our weekend brunches became solo excursions for me. Meeting some colleagues to discuss a project, I'd say, offering no opportunity for her to join. The truth was simpler. I was constructing a life that didn't revolve around her validation. Through mutual friends, I learned that her friend Megan had been poisoning her mind with freedom fantasies for months. Men are replaceable, and the dating pool is better than ever were apparently their favorite mantras. This friend had grown bitter after her husband left her for someone younger, a detail my wife conveniently omitted. Megan hadn't even secured the lucrative divorce settlement she boasted about, another convenient omission. One Thursday afternoon, While sifting through old boxes in our storage room for paperwork, I found a journal Amber had kept during the early years of our marriage. I know it's not right to invade someone's privacy, but given my recent discoveries, I felt justified. What I read confirmed my suspicions and worse. Early entries were affectionate, detailing our shared future, but entries from about 2 years prior began to shift. Met Jay's husband today. He just bought her a beach house for their anniversary. Why can't Jake be more ambitious? And Megan says I settled too young, says I could have landed someone with real money if I'd waited. The most recent entry from just a month before, Richard says I deserve better than what Jake can provide. He's right. I've wasted my prime years on someone who will never understand the lifestyle I deserve. Richard? Who the hell was Richard? I investigated. Richard Davis was a senior partner at her law firm, married in his 50s, known for mentoring young paralegals. I checked our phone records, dozens of calls and texts between them, often late at night or early morning when I was at the gym. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. One evening, I hosted colleagues, a rare occurrence. Not my usual work friends, but new connections from the elite security firm I was interviewing with successful, ambitious individuals who spoke of seven-figure contracts and international assignments. One casually mentioned his vacation home in Bali. Another discussed how his wife had just launched her own nonprofit because money was no longer a concern. I observed my wife lingering nearby, captivated by every word, her eyes widening at the mention of the lifestyle she so clearly coveted. Her narrative about me was being dismantled by external perspectives. She was witnessing what I was capable of becoming without her. After they departed, she was unusually attentive. "Your friends seem really successful," she said, attempting a casual tone. "They're at the top of their field," I replied. "They work incredibly hard." "You never mentioned you knew people like that," she said, clearly probing. "There's a lot we haven't been talking about lately, isn't there?" I responded, holding her gaze until she averted her eyes. Her attempts to re-establish connection became blatant. Wearing dresses I'd complimented months ago, preparing my favorite meals without prompting, suggesting weekend getaways like we used to. But I maintained emotional distance, offering polite thanks but no enthusiasm. One random Tuesday, she greeted me in lingerie under her robe when I returned from work, as if I were meant to drop everything and adore her. I looked at her, stated, "I'm not really in the mood." Long day, and headed for a shower. The stunned expression on her face was worth every second of the cold shower I subsequently took. On a Thursday night, I deliberately took a call in front of her. It was my contact at the elite firm, offering me the position, a $295,000 base salary plus performance bonuses that could push it over $400,000. Significantly more travel, but the company provided accommodations in every major city. I accepted immediately, watching her expression shift from casual interest to sudden, panicked attention. "You took a new job without discussing it with me?" she asked after I hung up, her voice a mixture of shock and what sounded like fear. "It's been in process for weeks," I said calmly. "I didn't want to jinx it by talking about it too soon." "But what about us? That sounds like you'll be gone all the time." "I thought you wanted financial growth," I replied. "Isn't that what you've been hinting at for months?" She had no answer. That night, she attempted to initiate sex for the first time in months. I kissed her forehead and claimed exhaustion. The shock on her face was priceless. The dynamic had completely inverted. Now she was seeking validation I was unwilling to readily provide. Through careful observation, I uncovered more about her exit plans. Her browser history revealed apartment listings, all in the expensive part of town she'd always coveted. Email receipts for career coaching sessions focused on leveraging divorce for financial security, I'm not kidding, and text messages to Megan about starting fresh and getting what she deserves. What truly infuriated me was discovering a saved draft email to a divorce attorney, outlining how she'd been a supportive wife who sacrificed her career for her husband and deserved appropriate compensation. This, from a woman who worked part-time at best, spent more than she earned, and whose greatest sacrifice was driving a Lexus instead of a Mercedes. Utterly delusional. That weekend, she watched me pack an overnight bag. "Where are you going?" she asked, attempting casualness but failing to mask the edge in her voice. "Seattle, meeting with the new team, might extend to Sunday," I said, offering no further detail. "You've been gone a lot lately," she said, following me around the bedroom. "Is everything okay with us?" I looked directly at her. "That depends on what you want us to be." The color drained from her face. I thought she might confess everything, the list, the secret account, her conversations with Megan. Instead, she forced a smile. "Just missing you, that's all." I nodded and continued packing. The truth was, I was indeed going to Seattle, but not just for meetings. I was looking at condos in a luxury high-rise downtown. Knowledge before action always. The morning before I returned, she called me frantic. Her car was making a strange noise and wouldn't start. She wanted me to cancel my meetings and come home early to deal with it. "Just call a mechanic," I said. "Use the emergency credit card if needed." "But I don't know anything about cars. What if they rip me off?" "Then you'll have learned an expensive lesson about adulting," I replied. "I believe in your ability to handle this." I hung up while she was still protesting. A year ago, I would have rushed home to fix it for her. It's remarkable how quickly priorities shift when you see someone's true colors. While in Seattle, I took a more crucial step than house hunting. I hired a private investigator. My military buddy recommended him, an ex-Special Forces operative specializing in infidelity cases. I provided him with all the information I had on Richard Davis and instructed him to dig deeper. Money was no object. I wanted everything. Upon my return from Seattle, I maintained my new routine: morning gym, longer hours at work, minimal engagement at home. Amber seemed increasingly desperate for my attention, which I dispensed sparingly. The power dynamic had completely inverted. I focused on preparing our finances for the inevitable split. I began transferring funds to accounts she couldn't access, nothing illegal, just safeguarding what was rightfully mine. I meticulously documented all our assets and her spending patterns, creating spreadsheets that highlighted how much of our income went to her shopping, Pilates classes, and girls' trips. 2 weeks later, the PI delivered his report. It was more damning than I could have imagined. Richard and Amber had been engaged in an affair for at least 6 months. The PI had photos of them meeting at an upscale downtown hotel, receipts for jewelry Richard had bought her, and screenshots of their text messages, recovered by his specialist. In these messages, Amber referred to me as her starter husband and laughed about my cluelessness regarding her plans. Richard promised to take care of her once she was free from her marriage. They'd even discussed which neighborhood she should consider for her post-divorce life. But here, where it got truly interesting, Richard had no intention of leaving his wife, Nancy. In fact, in messages to his golf buddies, he bragged about having the perfect arrangement: a wife who maintained his social standing, and a hot younger piece on the side who made him feel important. The PI also uncovered something I hadn't anticipated. Amber had applied for a home equity line of credit 3 months prior, using a forged signature that was supposed to be mine. The bank had flagged it as suspicious, but hadn't rejected it outright yet. She was attempting to extract $75,000 from our home's equity without my knowledge. That was a felony. Armed with this information, I contacted Richard's wife, Nancy. We met for coffee while Amber believed I was at work. Nancy was understandably devastated but also coldly furious. She'd suspected something but lacked proof. "What do you want to do about this?" I asked her. "Destroy them both," she said without hesitation. "Richard's prenup has an infidelity clause. If I can prove he cheated, he gets nothing." We formed an immediate alliance. Nancy was the vice president of human resources at Amber's law firm, granting her significant leverage over my wife's career. We agreed to coordinate the timing of our confrontations for maximum impact. The other person I contacted was Kelly, Richard's executive assistant. Through the PI, I'd learned that Richard had repeatedly promised her promotions, only to give opportunities to women who slept with him. Kelly was enraged when I shared what I knew and agreed to help us gather even more evidence from within the firm. My final step was visiting Amber's parents. They had always liked me, and we had maintained a good relationship over the years. I brought copies of the most incriminating evidence, not the intimate photos, but the text messages where she called me her starter husband, and the documentation of the forged loan application. Her father, a retired judge, was visibly shaken. "This isn't how we raised her," he repeated. Her mother cried and repeatedly apologized. I assured them I didn't blame them and explained my plan. They reluctantly agreed that Amber needed to face consequences, though they pleaded with me to consider dropping the fraud charges if she cooperated with the divorce. "I'll consider it," was all I promised, "but she needs to understand the gravity of what she's done." During this time, I received a surprising call from Megan's husband, Dave. The Pie had discovered that Megan was also having an affair with Dave's brother. Ironically enough, Dave was devastated when I shared the evidence. He confirmed my suspicion. Megan had been coaching Amber on how to maximize her divorce settlement and had even helped her create the secret bank account. "These women think we're just ATMs," Dave said bitterly. "They have no idea what's about to hit them." After 3 weeks of my calculated distance, I decided it was time for the confrontation. I dressed in my finest suit, the new one I'd purchased from a high-end men's store, not the off-the-rack items. She always complained made me look average. I left for work as usual but returned home unexpectedly at noon. As anticipated, she was on the phone, speaking in hushed tones to Megan. I stood silently in the doorway until she noticed me and frantically ended the call. "You're home early," she said, looking nervous. "Is everything okay?" "We need to talk," I replied, keeping my voice even. The color drained from her face as I walked to her desk, opened the drawer, and retrieved the list. 15 reasons to leave me. I placed it between us on the coffee table. "When were you planning to discuss this with me?" She opened and closed her mouth several times before responding. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to understand exactly what's happening here," I said, maintaining eye contact. "Megan gets divorced and suddenly our decade-long marriage needs evaluation. Convenient timing." She immediately attempted damage control. "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I interrupted calmly. "You've been planning your exit for months. Secret bank account, apartment searches, career coaching focused on maximizing divorce settlements, all while I was building our future." The shock on her face confirmed she hadn't expected me to know these details. "I was just exploring options," she stammered. "Sometimes I feel undervalued in the lifestyle we—" "Let's address your list point by point," I continued, refusing to engage with her emotional manipulation. "Insufficient income. I've secured a position that nearly triples my current salary. Embarrassing job. Funny. My new employer seemed to think my military background and security expertise are quite impressive. Not embarrassing." I methodically dismantled each accusation, watching her confidence crumble with every counter, not with anger or defensiveness, but with facts delivered without emotion. "Your list reflects your own materialistic values and entitlement, not any actual problem with me," I concluded. "You've been plotting to upgrade to a wealthier model because it's easier than being grateful for what you have." She began to cry, the universal defense mechanism when logic fails. "I don't know what happened to us. You used to care about what I wanted." "I used to think what you wanted was us," I replied. "Now I see what you really want is status and a certain lifestyle, but you were willing to throw away 10 years for it." "That's not fair," she sniffled. "I just want what other women have." "Is that so wrong?" "What other women have?" "You mean the Instagram lifestyle that's mostly fake, or what Megan claims to have while she's drowning in debt and sleeping with married men?" Her tears stopped abruptly. "How dare you talk about Megan like that? She's been nothing but supportive. Professional courtesy. Is that how you see our marriage?" She was trying to regain control of the conversation. "That's how you treated it," I replied. "Like a business arrangement you could terminate with a pros and cons list the moment a better offer came along." The silence stretched between us. Finally, she asked the question I'd been anticipating. "So, what happens now?" I removed an envelope from my jacket pocket and placed it next to her list. This was my ace. She opened it with trembling hands, expecting divorce papers. Instead, she found photographs of her with Richard Davis at the hotel, screenshots of their text messages, and a copy of the fraudulent loan application with her forged version of my signature circled in red. I can explain, she whispered, her face ashen. I'm sure you can, I replied, but save it for your lawyer and for the police when they ask about the identity theft and bank fraud. Police, her voice was barely audible. Did you think forging my signature on a $75,000 loan application was just a minor transgression? I asked. That's a felony, Amber, 5 years minimum. You wouldn't report your own wife, she said, but she didn't sound confident. My own wife, I laughed without humor. You mean the woman who called me her starter husband to her married lover who plotted to take half my assets while sleeping with someone else? That wife. She began sobbing again, but this time it wasn't for show. I made a mistake, Jake. A terrible mistake, but we can work through this. There's something else you should know, I continued as if she hadn't spoken. Richard told Nancy everything, too. When she confronted him, her face went completely pale. He showed her all your texts, I continued, including the ones where you were planning your future together once you were free from your marriage, the ones where you called me your starter husband and laughed about how clueless I was. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He told Nancy it was just a fling, that you were the aggressor, that you promised him you were already separated. Classic throw under the bus move. Nancy forwarded everything to your boss. You've been terminated effective immediately. Your belongings are in a box at security. Tears streamed down her face, but these weren't manipulative tears. These were the tears of someone watching their entire world collapse. Jake, I can explain. No need. It's all quite clear. I stood up. I filed for divorce this morning.